is a series of limits and opposing forces, but there have always been people drawn to the line between limits and freedom, to the edge of what seems possible. The obsessive studies of Sir George Cayley led to the first recorded human flight when he convinced a small boy to take a ride on one of his experimental gliders. German engineer Otto Lilienthal followed with his own extreme leaps of faith. Based on Lilienthal's writings, the Wright brothers made their famous powered flight over the sand dunes of North Carolina. Since then, the physical laws of air have created an incredible frontier for the human race. Flight is now a symbol of modern life. Aircraft have become so technologically advanced that the experience of flight for most people now includes watching movies and sleeping. Free flight is a little different. Free flight continues to aggressively seek the edge. It's the same edge that Cayley and Lilienthal were drawn to. It's the edge of possibility, where humans meet the limits of the physical world. Free flight is playing with gravity. It's playing on the edge. It's playing with possibility. It begs the question, what can you do with a wing, a body, and air? It's extreme flight in an aircraft that's barely there. It minimizes the aircraft and maximizes the flight. To some, that's the point.
Well, free flight to me is being in an aircraft that'll have an open cockpit and the wind's blowing past you and you have peripheral vision that's unobstructed and having the feeling of a weight shift wing above you that becomes an extension of yourself.
Free flight, you're on an aircraft, but you're outside of it.
Free flight to me is flying with the most simple aircraft you can imagine and being out there, riding the wind, feeling the elements.
I think free flight means to me is just the experience of soaring.
Being able to zoom around the cloud tops or skip the top of the waves. Hi Andrea, how you doing?
Good, how about you?
Good to see you again.
You too.
You ready to go flying? We're going to do some pre-flight here, kind of walk you around the aircraft and get you familiar with it, and then we're going to get in it and go punch some holes in the sky.
Sounds great.
We'll chunk out.
In order to reach the edge where free flight exists, we thought we'd take Andrea, a mechanical engineer specializing in aerospace technology, who happens to also be a conventional pilot, toss her up in the air with some unconventional free flight pilots and see what happens.
I think I've always been interested in aeronautics. I mean, as a young child, I always wanted my pilot's license. And when I got out of college and landed the job in aerospace, it was very exciting for me. Now, I noticed, being a pilot myself, that this aircraft does not have ailerons, rudders, and elevators.
Exactly.
Now, how do those properties correspond to
They've
this
eliminated any
aircraft?
moving parts. Because we're hanging like a pendulum, we use our weight to turn us or make us go faster or climb.
Actually, I was pretty surprised at the takeoff. I wasn't expecting it to go that fast that soon.
Andrea's free flight adventure will explore two of the most dynamic forms of flight today, powered ultralight kites and unpowered paragliding.
Well, taking off in a paraglider, you're pretty much running off the side of a mountain and you are hoping that the sail catches and you're able to lift off from the edge of the mountain.
Greek mythology tells of Daedalus fashioning bird-like wings in order for he and his son Icarus to escape Crete. During the escape, Icarus flew too high and paid with his life. Flying is an act of incredible freedom, but with that freedom comes high stake limits. No matter what kind of risk you take in the air, there are physical limits you must balance to stay in the air. If you push too hard and lose that balance, you die.
Paragliders and airplanes and paper airplanes all follow a lot of the same rules of flight. There's always a lift force being generated while it's flying and a drag force pulling it back. So a paraglider, to overcome that drag force, is always descending downhill through the air mass, whereas an airplane has an engine pulling it forward to keep it flying level.
top speed on this aircraft is 81 knots. And airspeed and ground speed are two different things. Basically, airspeed is the speed that you're traveling through the air. So if I'm flying through the air at 50 knots and the wind is blowing behind me at 10 knots, we're actually crossing the ground at 60 knots because it's pushing us.
To get an idea of how sensitive an ultralight is, consider that while flying a Cessna or small traditional aircraft, the pilot is buffered by 2,400 pounds of airplane. An ultralight weighs only 450 pounds. Every ounce of the pilot is at play as the wing cuts the air. The horsepower to weight ratio is also telling. A small traditional aircraft might offer 0.06 horsepower per pound, while an ultralight offers twice that. Ultralights inhabit a romantic place in the collective psyche of pilots. They are, in concept, the most bird-like of aircraft in that they are minimal, but also powered. The pilot can turn and go wherever they want.
When I first researched about ultralights, I couldn't understand why someone would want to put an engine on the back of a hang glider. I thought that took away from the whole idea of what a hang glider was and why you flew one. But once I started walking around and talking to the pilot and seeing what exactly it could do, I totally understood why so many people love flying them and how much fun they could actually be.
Before taking off on a motorized kite, Andrea and Jerry inspect the aircraft for safety. This also gives Andrea a good chance to examine the structure and design of the ultralight.
It's a 65 horsepower Rotax engine, water-cooled, oil-injected. It burns unleaded gas. There's a tank right here. This pusher prop is made out of carbon fiber, and it's 4 blades. And I like a 4-blade prop because it keeps it quieter. It slows your tip speed down. Also, I've got an intake and outtake silencer over here, and that keeps the muffler exhaust sound down also.
Now, I noticed on this prop there's a couple of dings. How low can you actually go?
Well, the dings that I get are due to the fact we land all over the place. We land on cane roads. I want to go swimming at the beach over here, we'll go land, and it's just a factor. And all you do at the end of the day, if you get dings, I got a little ding repair kit, and you just fill the hole and patch it and sand it, and away you go again. Technology has just come so far. I started flying back in '77, and it is just leaps and bounds. Well, the parachute system is mounted back here to get it out of the airflow. Inside this can here is a 1,050 square foot parachute that's hooked to this cable here. The apex is hooked to the rocket here, and it's solid liquid rocket fuel with thermite triggers that I can detonate the thermite triggers through this cable right here. And it shoots out at about 2,500 miles an hour and will pull the parachute to full deployment in about 2 seconds. The line goes up here, as you can see, routed around the wing. So under canopy, the aircraft would be sit in an upright position like this with a full canopy above. And that's a nice feature for a number of reasons. Catastrophic failure, unlandable terrain, or water landing.
So you're saying that this is 100% safe, that there's absolutely no...
No, there's nothing absolutely 100% safe. It's just, but that really helps. I mean, I feel a lot more comfortable flying than this in a small plane because I can land this anywhere, and if it really is crummy, I can blow out my chute and drift straight down in. You're gonna put your right heel on this square tube right here, okay? And you're gonna grab onto this bar here and over here and just jump right on in that back seat, okay? It's kind of like getting on a horse. Yeah. So this one doesn't bite. Strength of the equipment, the reliability, and our backup parachute systems, and every year it just keeps getting better, stronger, lighter. Switch is on. Clear prop. This aircraft is certified 6 Gs positive and 3 negative. Compared to a small Cessna, for example, that's certified 2 3/4 Gs positive and 1.5 negative, so it's considerably stronger. The difference between aircraft that are open cockpit and weight shift compared to a fixed wing aircraft such as a small plane. Small planes are great, they're for transportation. It's more like a car with wings. This is more of an experience to go flying and feel the wind in your face, and you forget about everything on the ground and you're just going up to enjoy the beauty of it.
Andrea is used to the relatively cumbersome experience of conventional flight. But hey, if the parachute works, why not? For her, this is the closest to the edge of free flight she's ever come.
When we first took off, I was very surprised to see or to feel how easy it lifted and how less turbulent that it was than I thought it would be. Before you knew it, we were like 1,000 feet in the air. It was a lot smoother than I thought it would be. I thought we'd be bumped around a lot because it was so light, and they even said it was very windy that day.
Air's a little lumpy today.
We're going to head to the west along Pullaholi's of 18-Mile Beach, one of the most beautiful beaches in the world.
Now a lot of these cliffs are accessible for a mountain bike ride. When there's hiking up there, it's a popular hunting area. You can actually drive four-wheel drives right to the end. We actually go there to fly our hang gliders off.
Are those the Nepali cliffs?
Those are the Nepali cliffs, yeah. They're more commonly known as the Nepali coast.
I have to say riding an ultralight in Kauai was an amazing experience. It's the best way, I think, to see the beauty of the island and actually be close enough to touch it almost, because you have the open cockpit in the ultralight, unlike a helicopter where you would be closed in and not really be able to see the details. The ultralight you can get within just a few feet, depending on the conditions of what you're flying over, so it just makes the experience so much more thrilling.
Take away the engine and rigid frame of the ultralight kite, and what do you have? Fabric. That's it. Paragliding is literally flying on a piece of fabric and strings. Fabric keeps you aloft, carries you to safety, swings your body through 4G turns, or, if you're not careful, collapses at 3,000 feet and ends your life.
In the United States, there's approximately 1 fatality for every 700 participants. Part of the reason for that actually varies. The accidents are also very different from each other. A lot of them occur because the paraglider collapses at low altitude, and usually the pilot's flying in conditions that are way too strong or flying a glider that's too high performance for his ability.
Paragliders rely on airflow to give shape to their wing. Each wing has a hole in the frontal area that allows airflow to fill the wing, providing it with the cambered shape necessary to achieve lift. Paragliding is body plus wing plus air. It's that simple. The human body is in the middle of the physics that keep it aloft and alive.
In a lot of ways, paragliders are similar to other aircraft, because aerodynamics don't change very much. The neat thing about paragliders is that it's just a wing flying above you. You don't have a tail section or a fuselage to worry about. But then the paraglider has the effect of the pendulum, the pilot hanging down beneath the wing, which makes the flight mechanics much more interesting. A stall speed is the minimum speed that you can fly in aircraft before the flow separates over the top surface and becomes really turbulent. And when that happens in a paraglider, when you're flying along and you stall, suddenly the paraglider creates a lot of drag and falls back behind the pilot. The momentum of the pilot brings him forward. So it's very important at that point in time that the pilot holds the wing in a stalled state so that he can fall back beneath the wing and then let it recover. If you try to recover when it's back here, it's possible for you to do a forward loop and then fall inside the paraglider.
Aspen is one of the most spectacular places in the United States to fly paragliders. In the summer, its valleys and rock taluses create warm air thermals on which hawks and paragliders climb to towering altitudes. In winter, it becomes a paragliding playground. Ski lifts offer easy access to launching sites. From these sites, Zach, Andrea, and friends will take off and cross the valley to a landing area 3,000 feet below. The flight should take about 15 minutes, just enough time for Andrea to figure out what the heck she's doing up there before Zach hands her the controls.
Going up in the gondola, I had a chance to talk to the paraglider that I was going to fly with. He put my mind at ease and instructed me a little bit more about what we would be doing. But mostly I was anxious to get into the glider and to take off and experience this form of free flight in winter conditions. So we're at the top of the mountain. What do you do now? Where exactly do you check the wind to see if the flight's going to take place?
Since the wind's blowing over the backside here, we should walk up to the edge and see how strong it really is.
Okay.
Get a real feel for it.
The window of opportunity in paragliding is a narrow one. The aircraft is so minimal that wind conditions must be just right. Zach and Andrea's launch site is below the peak of the mountain and on the leeward or downwind side. This presents some very specific dangers.
So what's it looking like? Does it seem like we're going to be able to get a flight off this morning, or what?
Well, the wind's pretty strong blowing over the backside of the mountain here. You can see from the clouds moving, the trees are shaking, and the streamers are blowing. So it's looking a little bit too strong. We'll probably have to call this one.
Man. With paragliding, it's a waiting game. It's very dependent on weather. There's a very small window of opportunity, very small band of conditions that you can take off in. So if you're a very impatient person, it's probably not something that you really want to get into, because you definitely have to wait a lot on weather. The wind was questionable at first, but as you know, with weather, it can change at any point. So we got 2 flights off.
All that theory is well and good, but what does it actually look like to the woman who's going to be up in the air with Zach?
You can see there's a little bit of airflow blowing down the ski slope here. So what we probably should do is hide behind these trees. Probably right over here. These trees kind of work like a rock in a stream, where the water's not moving much behind the rock.
So is that the first thing you do when you get to a site, is to check the wind?
You check the wind, pick out a good area to take off from. Right behind these trees is going to be nice here, because they're sheltering us from this wind. We'll lay the glider out right up against these trees here. Try to get as close as we can.
Give us as much runway as we need.
Yeah, the bigger the runway, the better.
Now notice this wing seems to be made out of ripstop nylon. Is this the standard material for a canopy?
That's generally the main material used for the entire canopy. Inside the wing there's stiffeners like mylar, but the main material is always ripstop nylon.
Now I noticed that there are holes in the top edge of this, or that's the leading edge, correct?
Correct.
Of the paraglider. What exactly are they used for?
The main purpose of the holes is to provide an entrance for the air into the glider.
Okay.
So they're really important when you're first pulling up the wing, because all this air is rushing inside. Once the glider's inflated, the air is kind of stopping here because it's just kind of stagnant all inside the wing.
Mm-hmm. Now, are there different shapes and sizes of canopies on paragliders?
Well, higher performance wings are generally longer and skinnier. This is kind of an average length to width ratio for a paraglider. All these lines that attach to the wing are keeping the glider in its shape when we put force on it. This paraglider sort of acts like a giant air mattress above us once it's inflated. And you can imagine if you didn't have enough lines going to an air mattress, it would start to deform there. So by spreading the load out across the entire glider with a bunch of lines, it keeps the paraglider from warping while we're flying through the air. My harness is a little bit different than yours, and it has these fast buckles here.
For a quicker release?
Quicker release, but in general I like to have that style on your harness so that passengers don't undo them easily.
Exactly.
When I'm not watching.
This is Andrea's first time flying in an unpowered aircraft. She is now at the mercy of the air and Zach's expertise.
So we're taking off right in front of us. We're going to just...
Yeah, imagine
start
that
running.
you're going to run right down into that valley, straight in front of us.
Okay. So when do you expect we should feel liftoff? Right as we crest?
Just out of
This
sight,
part.
probably,
Okay.
down the hill. Don't be alarmed if it's further than that. Once we're flying out there, I'm going to hand you the controls. I'll just pass them forward
Okay.
and go ahead and grab a hold of them. If at any time I say let go of them completely. Don't worry about handing them off to me.
Okay.
I'll be able to grab them. They won't fly away behind us.
Okay. When I was about to take off, the only thing that was going through my mind was making sure that I ran properly, that I listened to Zach to see if we needed to run faster or slower, or even abort the takeoff itself. I just wanted to be responsive to his commands. It's a very precarious and very treacherous part of the Freeflight experience. Good. Keep running, keep running, keep running.
Good job.
Oh my, okay, I need to slow down. I believe the most extreme thing is definitely the takeoff. Being that it is in winter conditions, you're taking off down a ski slope. There's snow, it can be slick, a little rocky, and the fact that it is pretty steep, so if you want to abort the takeoff, you're going to have to stop somehow. So definitely that's probably going to be the most extreme thing about the flight is making sure the takeoff goes smoothly.
Freeflight offers outrageous freedom and outrageous exhilaration. But unlike other sports, mistakes are not an option. A mistake on a skateboard means getting up and dusting yourself off. A mistake on a paraglider can end a life. Like extreme skiing and big wave surfing, paragliding is about risk management and knowing one's abilities. Risk management means knowing the personality of the air, assessing wind speed, its direction, its consistency or inconsistency over the terrain. Making decisions about risk is a big part of the sport. Zach Hoisington is not just a paragliding expert. He's one of the top paragliding competitors in the country. He also works as a designer for Boeing's Phantom Works, specializing in future aircraft design.
So Zach, I know paragliding is what you do on your downtime and what you do for fun. What do you do for a living exactly?
The rest of the time I have a really fun job. I work for the Boeing Phantom Works and I get paid to dream up new airplane concepts.
Really?
So I just kind of sit in a chair and sketch with a pencil and paper and sometimes on a computer and just try to shape new airplanes.
So since you're designing new airplanes, is there anything that you're working on right now that we could talk about or we could see?
Most everything I work on I can't talk about. Some earlier concepts are out now that, for example, the Pelican is something I was involved in from the beginning stages, which is a giant ground effect airplane that flies really close to the ocean. As a kid, I experimented with different paper airplane shapes, different ways of controlling them. I remember starting out by bending the nose and trying to use that to make it turn and then playing with the trailing edge of the paper airplane. I'm motivated to fly because I enjoy it so much. I just love the sensation of flying a paraglider. The way that it's so smooth through the air, when you bank up into a turn, you feel the G-forces. I haven't been able to feel that in anything else.
While paragliding is limited by the lift that nature is offering in a given moment, ultralight flight is very much about freedom. Taking off and landing on a dime and having the propulsion to go where you want. The landscape of Hawaii offers a lot to see. Getting there, getting to the most beautiful vantage point inspires a lot of flying. You can't just fly in a straight line, you gotta turn.
Well, these type of aircraft are called weight shift aircraft. The weight is always hanging from the center of gravity, and you control it by shifting your weight.
And we can pull in, it brings our nose down.
Mobile gives you the leverage. It's as simple as that. It steers like a cross between a shopping cart and a bicycle.
Some mild wing overs.
Almost everybody has had a flying dream, and that's what this is. Positive G-forces are that if, for example, you were doing a dive and then you pull up, that force pulling positive on the wing, where you feel gravity pulling you, that's a positive G. And so this particular aircraft didn't break under load testing until a 7G load test where it failed. They've never been able to break these positive in the air. The pilot blacks out before the aircraft breaks.
Oh yeah, pull a little 3G turn there.
It's nice to know that pulling 7 Gs is a possibility. The maximum Gs that a pilot might want to experience for a few brief moments is 4. That leaves plenty of room for Jerry and Andrea to have a little fun.
While in flight, we had a chance to skim the water around the island of Kauai, and that was something I'd never done before. It's something you would never do in a small aircraft. Getting close to the cliffs was another enjoyable part of the flight. The level that you're flying, no other person could be at that level at that time. If you hike the cliffs, you're standing on the top. If you're hiking the beach, you're standing on the bottom, but at no time could you ever be in the middle unless you're in an aircraft such as this. I was feeling a sense of exhilaration because I wasn't used to such an open air cockpit at that speed and at that maneuverability. So it was really getting through that in the flight and then realizing what mechanically we were achieving. It was really a neat experience getting that close to the surfers at that perspective. It's some place that you couldn't see any other way except if you were a bird or some other form of nature in the air. It's almost as if you could feel the spray coming off of their surfboards.
Learning how to fly started back in '77. I saw it in Southern California on a road trip and immediately was mesmerized. And I just looked up, I watched them for an hour, they didn't land. I literally had one within 3 weeks. My whole life just took a big left-hand turn for the better. I had no idea that it would end up being a career. It's just something that you can't explain till you've been up there. You forget about everything on the ground. Everything else goes away except your emotions of flying and the wind and the gravity and the beauty of it all. You're not thinking about anything else. And the reason I do it is because it's just flat out fun. And it keeps me from getting a real job. The cost of getting into sport like this, you can get into it fairly cheap. I mean, there are cheap aircraft out there. I'm personally not very fond of cheap aircraft. You need to pretty much spend at least $15,000 to get into a starter type of aircraft. They go all the way up to $40,000. The program to getting into this sport is the first step is to come up and go for a flight. Then you need to sign up for a course and come to a person like myself that holds a license and instructor certificate in this type of aircraft. Typically, 20 hours of training is involved in airtime. After the first 5 hours, it's all learning how to put it back on the ground. The flying part's relatively easy. It takes the desire to do it. You have to commit yourself to some time and cash to become a pilot. Some people are going to take more training than others. There's a learning curve, and some people pick it up quicker than others. And some people that I've trained, after a little while, they're just not getting. I suggest that maybe they take up bowling. The ability to get in the sky and fly an aircraft where the wing becomes an extension of yourself. You're not even thinking about the wing anymore when you're up there. And literally sometimes cruise with birds, and you really get to know what they feel like. And it goes back to the point almost everybody has had a flying dream. And when you're looking down and you have nothing around you, and that's what this is.
Andrea and Zach have been up for 10 minutes now. They've descended, but still have enough altitude to reach the landing site. Zach takes Andrea through the mechanics of a turn.
Good. Try slowing down, speeding up. Try a little right-hand turn.
After we took off, we were in the air for a couple of minutes, and Zach allowed me to take control of the paraglider, and he instructed me how to do braking, how to speed up a little bit, how to do a few turns left and right and oscillate a little bit. It was pretty responsive. You just pull down on the side that you want to turn, and you lean in, and the aircraft actually responds very easily to that, and the same thing with the other side. So because of the design and the weight, it responds very quickly.
The angle of attack changes the angle of the wing to the oncoming air. Angle up a little and you'll rise. Angle up too much and you'll stall. Angle down and you'll pick up speed and lose the altitude that gets you to the landing spot safely.
One neat thing about paragliding is it doesn't require any licensing to go out and fly on your own. Depending on where you're flying, though, the particular site may require that you're licensed, and there is a licensing organization in the United States. There are no legal requirements for safety. You could fly without a reserve parachute and without a helmet and ancient equipment if you wanted as well, but it wouldn't be very safe.
Now this looks like a photo of you, from what I can tell. How old were you here?
I was actually 11. This is my first day of paragliding. The performance of this glider wasn't too good. It would only glide 3 feet for every foot you would descend. So this is a really steep slope, and we just land right down to the base of it. And that's probably as high as I ever got.
Paragliding has grown over the past 10 years from a form of parachuting to a form of flying. Early paragliders had shorter, rectangular wings. They had a glide ratio in still air of 3:1 compared to a 9:1 ratio today. In fact, they were so inefficient that there was no ability to ride thermals and rise with the warm air. Since then, materials have improved, but the biggest changes come in wing shape. The aspect ratio is longer, the chord length or front-to-back depth of the wings is shorter, and wings are tapered at the end, creating a more uniform downwash as they slice through the air.
To increase the performance of a paraglider, you can increase the aspect ratio, which is the skinniness of the wing. The more elongated it is, the better the glide ratio is in general.
Today, paragliders are so efficient that they can literally climb thousands of feet on the uprising warm air of thermals, then shoot cross-country with a glide ratio that is 300% greater than it was 10 years ago.
Thermals are created by hot spots on the ground, where the air is heated more than the air around it. And that forms columns or sometimes just little segments of rising air.
What happens when you take a paraglider and turn it into a flying swing set? You get moves like this. This is stunt paragliding, and it's the rebellious little brother to the finesse of thermal flying. Stunt paragliders spend a lot of time on the edge of possibility. The wings of specialized stunt paragliders have shorter aspect ratios than standard gliders. They can't soar as far, but they're more stable and come with stronger lines and reinforced line attachments to withstand greater G-forces. Though Zach and Andrea are flying a standard paraglider, Zach decides to give Andrea a little stunt sampler. A wing over is a nice way to start. First, Zach rhythmically drags each wing. As the paraglider oscillates side to side, it builds momentum. A full wing over swings the pilot up to the level of the wing. Andrea's handled the wing over just fine. Phase 2 of Zach's plan to test Andrea's stomach is called a spiral roll. Zach starts with a standard turn, then slowly ratchets up the rate of the turn until he and Andrea are spiraling towards Earth. There's at least 3 Gs exerted at the apex of the spiral. If you're not traveling horizontally, you're dropping, and fast. More extreme than the spiral is a trick called the set. Like the spiral roll, the wing and pilot circle around each other. In this case, though, the pilot is at the center of the movement as the wing orbits. Most stunt paragliding is done at high altitudes, allowing pilots in trouble to recover, or at the very least, abort and parachute their way to safety. Lower altitude stunts are best performed over water. While most paragliders never deploy their emergency parachute in a lifetime of flying, stunt flyers might use theirs once or twice a year. To some, this is too risky. To others, it's the only way to reach the limits of human flight. Ah, the serenity of free flight, graceful turns, a God's eye view of mountaintops and surf. Ultralights are great for frolicking through an atmosphere generous enough to keep you aloft, but sometimes the gears of nature have their own priorities.
Oh, there's the mechanical turbulence from the hill. I'm going to get away from the hill.
What you experience in the ultralight in terms of turbulence is much more violent than what you would experience in a larger plane. The ultralight feels every little bump, every little knock.
The air is coming down the coastline right there, causing it to roll over in a called mechanical turbulence. And that's what we just experienced. We come out away from the hill. And then so now that air is coming down the coast and bumping into this calm air right here.
So what does that do to the engine?
Well, it's not the engine, it's the flying in turbulence. We're doing this for fun. The minute I'm not having any fun, then I go back to where I came from.
We were up for a pretty good while. After a few hours of flying, you can get a little queasy. When you get on the ground is when you notice it more than when you're in the air. I got a little sick when I was up there.
To read the weather, what I need to do for my job of taking people up is, first of all, before I leave the house in the morning, I go on the internet and I take a look at the buoy reports for wind velocities and what direction the wind's going to be and what the cloud cover is going to be. When we're flying, you want to be able to know what the wind direction is doing. Now we also have GPS and our ground speed helps, you can figure it out that way too, but you want to be able to look at water, bodies of water, meaning ponds, and will show smooth on one side and choppy on the other, and that'll indicate which way the wind is blowing. You can look at palm trees and smoke, of course. and read the cloud shadows as you're flying. You can see the cloud shadows on the ground that are tracking. But it's not necessarily the direction of the wind that you're in, but the direction of the clouds up above. It can be blowing a different direction on the surface versus at 3,000 feet.
Is that a rainstorm?
Yeah, rain squall anyhow. It's going down pretty hard out there.
Definitely want to steer clear of that.
Yeah, it's not a whole lot of fun flying in the rain.
Really haven't had that many scary experiences. My job is to know when to stay on the ground, when it's going to be scary, and so we don't even go. I mean, there's been times where I've experienced some severe turbulence and you're getting your butt kicked. And if it's really that bad, you just turn around and go back the way you've come. You have to have a certain mindset because there are dangers involved. And it's a discipline in weighing the risks, and with training and paying attention, you can bring the risk down to a minimal level. But as in anything, if you make a mistake, it might be your last one.
I believe there's one thing that separates being thrilled and being scared, and that's control. Being thrilled is in a state where you know that if anything were to happen, that you could actually gain control of that situation and come out safely. Down the road, it would be something that I would look into. I could definitely see myself owning an ultralight.
Now we're approaching our landing area, so we should check the wind direction. Looks like it's blowing really lightly from town, so we have to land going that way into the wind, and we're gonna come in really fast. So just be ready to run. Stand up anytime now. A little crosswind on the field too, so we're gonna have to land slightly diagonal. Exactly, yeah. Skim the ground here, and then flare all the way and run. Perfect. Wing will settle down gently in front of us. Nice. Good flight.
After the first run, Andrea's eager to find the edge of possibility that Freeflight is about. It's her turn to be in control of the paraglider. Though it would be illegal for her to take a solo flight so soon, Zach is going to see just how much she can handle on her own. They pack up the glider and follow the gang for a second run on Aspen.
Probably the most enjoyable part about the flight was the fact that it was very smooth. Because it was winter conditions, there was very few thermals. There was a nice cool breeze on your face, so it made the experience very enjoyable.
And these are the only 3 straps that you really need to buckle to be into the harness. You definitely wouldn't want to forget any of them.
Andrea sees if she can arrange the takeoff herself. She and Zach work the paraglider into takeoff position. Can she get the paraglider to take off without Zach's help?
I believe the toughest part of the semi-solo flight was definitely taking off. That sets a precedence for the flight. Zach was very good in instructing me how to run.
If the paraglider looks bad right in the beginning, if it doesn't come up straight, I'm going to stop, and I'll yell stop. And so we'll just stop running right then. If we went beyond that point, we're kind of committed. We really need to make sure that we fly off the hill.
I believe the most extreme thing is definitely the takeoff. Being that it is in winter conditions, you're taking off down a ski slope. There's snow, it can be slick, a little rocky. And the fact that it is pretty steep, so if you want to abort the takeoff, you're going to have to stop somehow.
Okay, we're about ready. Clear. 1, 2, 3, run. Good, keep running, keep running, keep running. Good job.
Oh my, okay.
Okay, go ahead and sit back and get comfortable.
They're up. Andrea's flying. Paragliding, whether it's cruising high mountain valleys or climbing thousands of feet on thermals, is about going where nature allows you to go. It's about finding what nature offers at that moment. Though its risks can be extreme, it's an experience of listening, of watching for signs of something invisible. You're riding something ethereal that exists only for a moment. It is a series of calculations that keeps your body suspended on invisible forces. Paragliding offers power in its minimalism. It asks for listening. It asks for precision. It demands complete connection to the moment at hand. Andrea seems to be getting the hang of it.
Being that the paraglider is much lighter, it responds more quickly. It doesn't go quite as fast as, say, a fixed-wing aircraft, but it responds much more easily. So they're pretty easy to fly, it seems.
Yeah, especially in smooth air. In turbulence, you're constantly playing with the controls to keep the wing stable and inflated. In turbulence, the wing can collapse.
Whoa!
I'll take these back for a second while our neighbors approach us.
Perhaps the ultimate expression of that precision required in paragliding is thermal flying.
When we're flying, we can look out and see areas that are more likely for a thermal to occur. For example, a sunny, exposed rock face would be better than snow-covered and trees. So when we're flying along, we'll go out and explore those areas based on the wind drift and try to get a picture of how the thermal is actually rising off the ground. During a long cross-country flight, there's probably always a few seconds when you're thinking, what on earth am I doing here? It's scary, it's turbulent, you're getting tossed around, you're hungry, you're thirsty. Why are you even flying? But usually you get over that very quickly. I can imagine my life without flight, but it wouldn't be as exciting.
Imagine an airplane you could pack up into a backpack. Imagine a day hike that turns into a free flight. You can hop on a flight to Europe and bring your aircraft with you. Just open your backpack on the side of a mountain and you're off. A modern solo paraglider, packed with a flight suit, emergency parachute, radio, altimeter, and variometer, weighs 42 pounds. The portability of paragliders allows for incredible freedom. No landing strips, no bulky frames to lug around, just a body in flight. It also fosters a sense of community in paragliders from many lands. Add to that the risks and adrenaline involved with the sport, and you get a tightly bonded community of people who support each other in the pursuit of free flight.
Well, Alex is here from Aspen Paragliding, so let's ask him what the conditions are like.
Okay.
Alex,
Hey,
this
guys.
is Andrea.
Hi.
Hey Andrea, how's it going?
meeting you.
Nice to
Good.
meet you. You find a community, and so it's nice when you are traveling around that you have the opportunity to meet people that are in the same sport that you are and giving you information about that sport in that area that you may be visiting.
You get a lot of people paragliding who are very technical, very interested in the technology of the wing, a lot of quiet people. You can also get a lot of extremists, risk taker type of people.
After flying with Zach and learning more about the sport, I definitely want to get into it. It's so easy, it's so inexpensive, it's so transportable that it's something that I definitely want to research into and try to make the time to get into the sport more fully.
What goes up must come down. That means Jerry and Andrea. Unfortunately, the gears of nature were not conveniently lining up for them. Strong winds eliminated certain landing strips. Improvisation takes on a new meaning when you're up in the air.
The conditions that we were experiencing, we were kind of dodging some weather. We had a small amount of time to actually make our landing because of the wind, how it was shifting. It's pretty precarious coming in for landing in one of those because they do get knocked around a lot, and when you're coming in for landing, you're doing it at a lower speed, so the response time is much slower. So you have a small window of opportunity to either pull up or even correct, if something happens with the wind.
Andrea's now halfway through her flight. She's gauging angle of attack, wind, airspeed, and ground speed. She's losing altitude with each turn. Okay, Andrea's got things under control. She's worked her way through rudimentary turns and felt the relation of the wing and the weight it's holding up. It's time to push the envelope a bit.
About 60 miles an hour.
And how many G's is that? 3 maybe?
Maybe 3, maybe a little bit more.
Holy cow.
As we've seen with ultralights, getting back on the ground safely is one of the most difficult parts of flying. When up in the air, there are no immovable objects threatening to violently interrupt your velocity. Paraglider landings can be delicate in the hands of an expert, but this is Andrea's first time. Just to be safe, Zach takes over and puts them down in one piece.
Now we need to check the wind direction one more time. Did you feel that little bubble when we exited?
Yes.
We flew into our own vortex.
Yes.
We actually waked yourselves. You want to try flying again? Just with your hands out of mine.
Okay.
Just loosely there. Good. So looking at the wind, it looks like it switched on us, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Looks like it's coming right from the sun.
So what do we need to do to lose what position should I be in?
Well, just in a second, I'll ask you to stand up all the way
Okay.
and just be ready to run.
Okay.
There's not much wind, so we're really going to run fast.
Okay.
So go ahead and stand up now. Get out of your harness there.
Okay.
Grab a hold. There you go. Put your hands back on line. Like a last minute wind change.
Yeah. Unpredictable.
Looking around here. And now I'm going to slow down. And then I'm going to speed up. Hands up all the way. That allows us to drive and get electric speed.
Okay.
And then just be ready to run. Good job.
Yeah! Stuck it.
Good job.
Thanks. That was awesome.
Free flight is many things. It's thrilling, it's beautiful, it's a frontier that puts pilots at one with their environment and the moment at hand. But it is also something that changes people.
The beauty of it is I've been able to take people up that are handicapped, or I've done some stuff with the Make-A-Wish Foundation. So there's one experience that I had that was really memorable with sharing my knowledge with people and going flying, is taking up this little handicapped kid that had a blood disease. Took him up and we broke through the top of the cloud layer, and there's these big towers everywhere, and he just goes, whoa! And I go, what's wrong? And he goes, man, I knew we could get high in this thing, but I didn't know we could get to heaven. And I just, well, son, it's not heaven, but it's pretty close.
Very relaxing, very comfortable. Isn't it? Surprising. Yeah, it is. This is definitely the best way to see Hawaii. You get so close to Mother Nature.
The emotions that you experience during free flight are much more personal than on a fixed wing. During free flight, you can feel the air rushing through your hair. You can smell, the scents that are in the air. You can feel the highs and lows of the temperature depending on what altitude that you're at. That's something that you can never get during a fixed wing because you're in a closed space.
The future of free flight is wide open. The edge where possibilities exist changes every year as materials become stronger and nuances of design create aircraft that are more responsive, more aerodynamic, and even lighter.
One important thing in the development of paragliding is that the performance is improved. And by improved performance, that also means the safety is improved. we're able to get a higher performance paraglider with greater security.
Stunts will also continue to push the limits of what is possible between humans, air, and gravity.
This experience has changed me in ways that are really hard to describe. First of all, just being that close to nature at that level is something that it's like a once-in-a-lifetime experience.
Pioneers of aeronautics are not only designing military aircraft, they're beginning to understand the dynamics of air better by getting back to basics. Virtual flight may be the wave of the future, but the intuitive, intimate experience of free flight places pioneers in direct contact with air as a dynamic force. It allows them to feel a bit of what birds feel as they manipulate the wind. The more people explore free flight, the more the human body and the wing will become one. What the human mind will do with this knowledge remains to be seen.